Hello everyone. I'm going to discuss this problem that we didn't get to in class for your midterm review. So I'm going to discuss it here with you. This problem says that the length of a rectangle is 10 feet longer than its width. The area of the rectangle is 50 square feet. What is the length and the width of the rectangle? So the first thing we should do to solve this problem is sketch a rectangle. Once we've sketched the rectangle, we should label the sides. So when we label the sides, we're going to label the width and the length. Okay, so if this is the width and it says that the length is 10 feet longer than its width, and I don't know the width, then we're going to label it with a variable. So I'm going to call the width x. Once you've labeled the width, we're going to label the length. The length is 10 feet longer than its width. So if the width is x, 10 feet longer means x plus 10. Here we have labeled both sides of the rectangle. Once we've done this, I take this additional information about the area. The area of a rectangle is equal to the length times the width. And now, with this formula for area of a rectangle, I can substitute the information they gave me on area, which is 50 square feet. So for A, I'm going to substitute the area that was given. For the length, I'm going to substitute this expression here that I have, which is x plus 10. That's my length. And for width, I'm going to substitute x. And notice that now I've ended up with an expression that I can solve. I'm going to go ahead and do the distributive property. I'm going to multiply x times x, x squared, x times 10, 10x. And notice I end up with a quadratic function, which I can solve using factoring, completing the square, or the quadratic formula. Since the problem asks me what is the length and what is the width, I need to find x in order to answer that. So let's go ahead and find x by one of the three methods that I just mentioned. Before I do that, I want to gather all my terms on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 50 and subtract 50 on both sides. That way, I end up with 0 is equal to x squared plus 10x minus 50. And now I have this quadratic function, which you can try to solve by factoring. We always try to start solving by factoring because it's the fastest, easiest method, okay? I already know this doesn't factor, so I'm going to use the quadratic formula. So to substitute my values into this equation, I have to identify what is A. A is the coefficient in front of the x squared term. So A is equal to 1. B is the coefficient in front of the x term. B is 10. And C is your constant term, which is negative 50. These values I'm going to use inside of this formula. So x is equal to the opposite of b. If b is 10, the opposite of 10 is negative 10, plus minus the square root of b squared, which is 10 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 50, everything divided by 2 times 1. Now we solve or simplify what's inside of the radical. So inside the radical, I have 100 plus 200, because negative 4 times negative 50 equals 200, and everything over 2 times 1, which is 2. We keep simplifying inside of the square root, negative 10 plus minus the square root of 300, everything over 2. Now, we're going to grab our calculator and calculate this value. Be careful because, let me scroll this down. Remember that we have two values for x here. One of my x values, I'm going to change this color. One of my x values is going to say x equals -10 plus the square root of 300, everything divided by 2. And the other x value is going to say -10 minus the square root of 300 over 2. So with your calculator, you're going to take the square root of 300 first, and then you're going to subtract 10 because you'll have a positive adding to a negative, you subtract. And then that whole result you will divide by 2. So let's see what we get. This x gives you 3.66. For this value of x, you get -13.66. Okay, so now you have two x's, two solutions, and you have to choose one. Since we're talking about a rectangle, physically, distances cannot be negative. Therefore, I am going to discard the negative solution and use the positive solution. So let's answer the question. It says, what's the length? Well, the length is x plus 10. So I'm going to substitute 3.66 plus 10, and that gives you 13.66 feet. And what's the width? This is the length. The width is equal to x. So it's equal to 3.66 feet. I hope you understood this problem, and if you didn't, go ahead, rewind, and watch it again. I'll see you in the next video.